Hello, I'm Megan Mance with the Homeland Security and Defense Forum, and we are excited to bring you a special 5G Fireside Chat with leadership from AT&T and the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or better known as NTIA. Today's Fireside Chat is part of HSDF's larger virtual symposium, Applying 5G to Transform Government Missions, taking place on Friday, April 16th. We encourage you to join us on the 16th for a series of discussions with leaders from Congress, the National Security Council, the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security, as well as leading industry technologists. And for more details and to register, please visit our website, hsdf.org. So it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today, Mr. Christopher Boyer and Ms. Evelyn Remaley. Ms. Remaley is currently the acting administrator of NTIA. She also serves as the Associate Administrator for the Office of Policy Analysis and Development at NTIA, and she provides support to the Secretary of Commerce and to the White House on issues impacting the internet and digital economy. And Ms. Remaley has an extensive cybersecurity background, and her current portfolio also emphasizes supply chain risk management, encryption, and the Internet of Things. And Chris Boyer serves as AT&T's Vice President of Global Security and Technology Policy, where he's responsible for the company's policy positions related to cybersecurity, national security, and technology. He notably serves as Executive Committee Chairman of the Open Radio Access Network, or ORAN, Policy Coalition, and he is also AT&T's primary contact to the National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, or better known as NSTAC. And throughout his career, he's led a number of efforts to improve public-private sector collaboration on cybersecurity. So thank you both so much for joining us. And Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Thank you very much for having us here. And Evelyn, welcome to our Fireside Chat. It's great to chat with you again. I know we've done many of these in the past over the years. So today's topic is really focusing on a lot of different issues that impact NTIA, but why don't we start with the one that seems to always come up in these types of conversation, and that is on 5G and 5G security. So let's start with the question just generally. You know, America today is leading the world in deploying 5G networks with best-in-class security because US companies are aggressively investing, innovating, and competing in the free market. One issue that comes up a lot is how can the government and industry work together to build on the progress that we've made today? Or what steps do we need to take today to make 5G deployment a truly coordinated and whole of government effort?
Well, Chris, thank you so much. First of all, it's great to be here with you today. As you said, we've done quite a few of these, and it's always a pleasure. And thank you to Megan as well, and to the forum for having us today and on these critical issues. So let me just jump in on that first question. As you know, NTIA is engaged in a number of efforts to ensure that America leads the world in 5G. That includes efforts to better secure our supply chain, strengthening cybersecurity, and finding new innovative ways to share and free up spectrum for commercial uses. If we take a step back and look at the 5G era, what you'll find is that collaboration and trust are more important than ever. We need to work together within and across government and also with the private sector, nonprofits, and academia. NTIA needs strong partnerships and to be strong partners with the Federal Communications Commission, federal agencies, Congress, and the White House. From our point of view, one of the surest routes to secure 5G is the development of a robust 5G commercial ecosystem in the US. We need to ensure that we are working to develop both the use cases and demand for 5G technologies that will drive its development and adoption, as well as the market incentives that allow our companies to thrive and compete at home and abroad. On the security side, we've been working directly with industry players on adding transparency to our software supply chain through the development of a software bill of materials, also known as SBOM. A software bill of materials helps those who write, purchase, or operate software to understand potential risks in the software supply chain. And when a new vulnerability or risk is discovered, an SBOM can help any organization realize whether they or their customers might be at risk. And we have also established the Communications Supply Chain Risk Information Partnership This is a program that is targeted towards small and rural equipment suppliers and providers of communication services. And we want to improve these companies' access to information about risks to key elements in their supply chain. So you can see we're doing a lot and working hard with both of our industry and key critical interagency partners on this issue as well.
Thanks, Evelyn. You know, and I can be maybe a bit of testimony here that NTIA has done really a phenomenal job of working with industry throughout all these different initiatives. And I think it's really important because, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of these networks are deployed by the private sector. So we have to be working together on, you know, implementing a lot of these different solutions that are out there. So I think on both cybersecurity and supply chain, there's certainly a lot of work being done, you know, by the industry and by government. I think it's a good example of good collaboration there to try to really do our best to try to improve security. Not that security it's not a zero-sum game, it's not 100% perfect, but I think we're making a lot of progress. Let's see. So you mentioned the FCC and some of the spectrum issues. So a good segue here would be, let's talk a little bit about spectrum policy. So in order to maximize US investment in digital infrastructure, you know, we obviously need smart spectrum policies to unleash that critical resource. The FCC recently took an important step to do just that by moving to develop rules to enable commercial use of the 3.54 gigahertz band. How is NTIA viewing spectrum these days? How are they planning to meet the rising demand? How are you thinking about the future of spectrum access and federal use? You know, do we need a national strategy for spectrum, as Secretary Raimondo called for in her confirmation hearing? These are all really important issues to industry, so curious to your thoughts.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And let me just first second your statements about the security partnerships with government and industry. I know NTIA has worked extremely hard and through our multi-stakeholder processes on SBOM, the work that we have all done on the botnet report and roadmap, such good partnerships going on to really continue to move security forward. And on the 5G front, it's critical and agreed in terms of industry coming to the table to share their thoughts with government through various engagements that NTIA has held. It's been extremely important. So that's been a good partnership. So let me, yes, pivot over to the spectrum side as well. And of course, first of all, NTIA absolutely supports the Secretary's call for a national spectrum strategy. As spectrum sharing mechanisms advance and we continue to increase efficiency, we're going to have an increasingly complex spectrum landscape. A coordinated national approach is exactly what we need to meet the demand for spectrum now and in the future. So spectrum is one of the most powerful economic engines for our country. It not only directly fuels economic activity, but it also powers innovation and new services that will keep us competitive for years, if not decades to come. And right now, NTIA's primary focus is the 3 gigahertz band, which you mentioned. And over the past 2 years, industry identified a crucial need for a consolidated and harmonized block of mid-band spectrum. That band includes the Citizens Broadband Radio Service, or CBRS, where commercial services are rolling out, the C-band, which just recently brought in more than 80 billion in auction proceeds, and the 3450 to 3550 megahertz band, which we're working with the FCC to help implement an auction later this year. We're on track for 530 megahertz of spectrum being made available in 3 gigahertz alone. And even as we focus on the task at hand, we're also keeping an eye on what will come next. Where might we need additional resources in the years to come? How can we make sure that wireless networks fulfill their role in closing the digital divide and boosting our economy? Are there additional bands we should be looking at? What are we learning from our current sharing efforts? Finally, we're also working to modernize the infrastructure we use to manage federal spectrum use, which would make our systems more secure, reliable, and automated. So also, again, on the spectrum side, really busy and lots of folks doing a lot of good work in this area to free up that additional spectrum that we need to move into 5G and other advanced service areas.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and it's certainly, I think the need for a national strategy on spectrum and related issues, right, is obviously becoming even more glaringly evident as we go along. And, particularly as we talk about mid-band spectrum, which has been, a particularly challenging issue, and even on other issues around 5G security and kind of making sure all those efforts are harmonized has been an ongoing challenge. So I think it's great to hear that there's a lot of thinking in those regards with the current administration. Let's see here. So the next topic is something that's kind of near and dear to me. This gets into the issue of, in an area that we've been very concerned about on the industry side for quite a while now, how do we have a secure and reliable 5G supply chain? As we've, there's been a lot of issues around the kind of consolidation of suppliers, particularly in the radio access part of the network. So how do we expand the supply chain and create a market opportunity for newer entrants and ensure that we have a diverse and secure supply chain for the long term? And one of the ways that at least we've been advocating to do that has been through the adoption of what is called open and interoperable interfaces in the RAN, or which can be called as ORAN, or the Open Radio Access Network, or it's one of the reasons that we founded the Open RAN Policy Coalition, was to advocate for policies along the lines of supporting more open interfaces. So I think one of the questions is, how do you see that kind of playing into the broader NTIA strategy? How does wider adoption of open architecture and software-defined networks, how can that improve security and reliability of the entire ecosystem?
Absolutely. Yes. No, I'm so glad that we're talking about this today, because it is so critical and one of our top priorities at NTIA, having that resiliency built into the 5G ecosystem, both domestically and globally, is critical as we move out, and it's critical to our national competitiveness as well. So NTIA is seeking to promote open architectures and vendor diversity as part of our overall vision for building out secure 5G networks. The US government fully supports industry's development of open interoperable networks, while recognizing the importance of maintaining a full suite of solutions offered by incumbent trusted vendors as well. But this would increase competition and provide network operators with additional options when purchasing network equipment and services from trusted vendors. We need to unleash the innovative power of the private sector and competition to develop these more secure, robust, resilient, and affordable networks that enhance our national security, build economic prosperity for our current era, and connect more of our citizens to the internet, which is also critical. And we aren't alone in this, however. In addition to the US, countries like Japan and the UK, United Kingdom, have already invested in developing government-funded research labs as well, testbeds and policy tools to promote open architecture networks. In fact, some of the leading Open RAN manufacturers are from these countries. Lower barriers to entry in the telecommunications equipment market would also unlock economic opportunities for innovative small and medium enterprises and entrepreneurs around the world. And we recognize that this effort should be industry-led. That said, governments can play a role to promote the transition to open networks and to ensure potential national security concerns are addressed. In line with that vision, the US has been actively engaging with the UK and other G7 members to launch a set of high-level principles on this priority issue. These principles would promote international collaboration on diversification of the telecom supply chain and help achieve a long-term vision of a more open, diverse, and secure market. Our approach to these discussions has been informed by NTIA's extensive stakeholder outreach to date, but we would still welcome additional thoughts on what industry thinks should be included in the principles and any possible next steps. Shared international principles are a first step, but they will not get us to the future we want alone. That is why we are partnering with the private sector and other like-minded governments on research and development, trials, test beds, and capacity building to promote a global transition to open interoperable networks.
That's great to hear. I mean, I guess the way I like to think of ORAN or Open RAN is it's really a down payment on the future, right? So if we want to see that market emerge in the long run as for our own economic and national security and for the greater benefit of the industry, policymakers can make the decisions that are being made today will set the foundation for that to happen in the future. And so things like, as you were saying, like R&D investment, coordinating with our allied countries to have similar policy environment, that'll set the foundation for investment in these companies and in the technology for the future. If the previous situation that existed where there's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace, that's obviously not a great incentive for additional investment. So I think laying that foundation, I really appreciate the role that the US government has played in kind of leading that charge, in particular from NTIA and the State Department. So Well, let's see here. So one last quick question to wrap up. This is obviously another issue that's top of mind for those of us at AT&T. So one of the things at NTIA, you've been featured prominently in some of the COVID relief packages over the last year, and more recently in some legislative proposals to expand broadband access. How do you connect efforts to expand internet access and affordability today to the future of 5G deployment and the success of some other cutting edge technologies?
And Chris, I'm so glad that you're asking this question today, because this is so much front of mind for us at NTIA as well. We are so focused on, especially still in the throes of the pandemic, so many Americans who need connectivity, who need to be able to connect into services and the lifeline that companies such as yours are providing at this time. So that is front of mind, making sure that all Americans are connected, knowing what we have learned in terms of the importance of this, but at the same time, wanting to be sure that we are looking to that innovative future, wanting to make sure that as we attempt and move out to get all of those Americans connected, that we're doing it in a way that is also setting us in a good spot as we're moving to deploy these advanced services as well. And so we are thinking about this issue every day. So let me give a little bit more detail here. So first, to briefly describe what's on our plate at the moment at NTIA, we are currently implementing 3 grant programs that are funded by the Consolidated Appropriations Act, passed earlier this year. One of those programs directs $300 million toward broadband infrastructure deployment in areas that lack broadband, especially rural areas. Another program focuses on tribal governments with $1 billion in funding to be used for broadband deployment on tribal lands. And the third is Connecting Minority Communities pilot program that will direct $285 million to HBCUs, TCUs, and other minority serving institutions. At the same time, President Biden has released his American Jobs Plan, which proposed an investment of $100 billion to bring affordable, high-speed broadband to every American. The animating principle behind our grant programs and the president's plan is that as our technology advances by leaps and bounds, we cannot leave millions of Americans behind. It's also important that the plan prioritizes building future-proof broadband infrastructure in unserved and underserved areas. That means building out fiber backhaul that could potentially support 5G deployment in some of these areas, projects that signal their ability to scale over time to accommodate more advanced services such as 5G will be viewed favorably. In rural areas especially, we want innovation to help us connect that last 2% and to ensure those Americans receive quality service. I also think it's important when we're talking about cutting edge technologies to mention FirstNet and public safety, which is a big priority for this administration. Our partnership with AT&T on FirstNet is ensuring that our first responders have access to the latest technologies and a reliable network. We're also working to bring more of our 911 call centers into the modern era through our work on the National 911 program with the NHTSA, NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And you can begin to see how NTIA's work and all of these disparate threads that we work on begin to weave into a more coherent strategy for connectivity, for security, for advanced, innovative communication services for Americans and for a global market that we want to continue having Americans lead on. We want to encourage and support that technological innovation and advancement and help ensure that these advances reach and help as many people as possible. Chris, thank you so much for these fantastic questions today. It's been great to be with you.
Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. You're gonna have it's going to be a busy year.
It's going to be a busy year for all of us. Yeah.
You guys have your work cut out for you, but I know that NTIA is in great hands and really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. And hopefully this has been informative for the audience. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks all.